Rarbomb here with a 3D modeling for 3D printing tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how to model some basic chess pieces. To set up, under Preferences, I have my key mapping set to Blender 27X. I have under Add-ons, these are the enabled add-ons that I use, the most important ones being Loop Tools and Bool Tool. Our very first step is going to be adding a reference image. Go to Add, Image, Reference. Unselect Align to View, then hit Load Reference Image. So let's align the reference image to line up there correctly. To do that, we're going to select the reference image, hit R to rotate, then we're going to hit X to rotate along the X-axis like so, just like that, until it hits about 90. You can even just go up to here and click 90. That's a much faster way to do it, actually. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to scale the reference image up, hitting S and dragging out. But we need to know how big to scale it. So we're going to do that by scaling everything to the size of the pawn. So this pawn should be about 5.5 centimeters tall, or 55 millimeters. The base should be half of the height. So we're going to make this here the size of what we want that pawn to be. So we'll make the dimensions on this 55 by 55 by 55. Really big. Uh-oh, we lost our little object in the middle. It's easy. Z to go into X-ray view, select that object and hit S to scale. Scale it up like so. You can scale after modeling, but I personally prefer to do it initially. Now you can also hit G to grab and move the object so it can kind of line up there in the middle. Then hit S to scale, G to move, scale it down. Get it to be about roughly right there. It doesn't have to be exact. Again, this is for your own personal use. You can do whatever you want to do with this. All right, now we have it scaled correctly. This cube here, we don't need it anymore. You can hit delete, save, and now we can get to the actual modeling process. Things labeled correctly that you're working on. So we're going to go up to the right here, and we're going to select this empty, which is the reference image, and we're going to call it reference image. I believe that is spelled correctly. Now we're going to add a collection. If you select Scene Collection, right click, hit New Collection. We're going to call this Pawn. Nice and simple. And save. Press 1 to go to front view. Now we're going to add our first mesh. That mesh is going to be a cylinder. Look how tiny that is. Will you see this little thing down here? Set the vertices to 16. Set the radius to, I don't know, 13. That's roughly 26. That's about half the height. Depth, how about 4? That looks good. Again, we're going to be working off of this. Now we're going to press G and then Z. That'll let us move it down or up along the Z axis and move it down to the bottom. And look, it's a little too small, so hit S to scale it, just like that. There we go. It's a good size, a good scale. 32, that works for me. But notice the object is kind of rough looking. It's not very smooth. Let's make it smooth and do it in a very easy way. Go over here to the right. Go to Modifier, which is the little wrench, hit Add Modifier, and add a subdivision. You'll notice the object is now looking like a little disc. We want the bottom to be flat though. So to do that, we're going to go to Edge Select, and we're going to select the edges that we want to flatten out. You can select them all one at a time, which is rather slow, or you can hit Alt and select one of those edges, and it will loop around the entire thing. Go over here, which is under Item, in the upper right. We're going to set the Mean Crease to 1. You can actually adjust this on your modeling to adjust how much you want that to kind of lock in and make it flat. You'll see it's a little rough here too. You can actually just increase the levels in the viewport to add more vertices. These two things are most of the principles that we're actually going to use in this modeling. There's one more. Go up to the upper left, hit Face Select. We're going to select the top face. Press 1 to go back to front view. We're going to hit E to extrude. Extrusion, it adds more polygons on top of the existing polygons, based upon whichever direction you want to go. We're going to drag up a little bit like that. You can see lining up right there. If you want to move it more, hit G and Z, like that. Then we're going to hit E to extrude again, like so. Then hit S to scale it, have it go in a little bit. We can adjust all this later, so don't be too worried about getting it just right. E to extrude, E to extrude, S to scale in, E to extrude up, right there, S to scale, E to extrude. This is where it's a little tricky to figure out how exactly to do this part right here. Then S to scale, E to extrude again for the very top of that, scale in right there. We're going to do the little sphere on top a little bit different. Hit Tab, you can go in here and you see this nice little smooth object. However, there's some kind of sharp edges on this, so we're going to replicate those in our object using that little crease. So go back to Edit Mode. And you'll see this, we can't see the edges in here. That's easy. Go over here to On Cage under Subdivision, click it, Alt-click, hit our Mean Crease. There we go. Nice sharp edges. You can make that sharp or just curve it a little bit. We can kind of adjust it depending on how we want it to look. There's a little bit of a lip here, so let's actually just move it down. Do this by selecting all of the vertices, hitting G and then Z to grab and move down. There's a little bit of a hook in here, so let's replicate that. We're going to go over here on the left to a loop cut, add it right there, S to scale, and that gives us our little loop. We'll do the same thing right here. Add a little loop, G, just like that. You're kind of doing a little bit of digital sculpting by manipulating the object. I selected the face right here, kind of poking around and kind of trying to get it to look the way you want it to look. Now these chess pieces have a very sharp bottom right here. This doesn't actually print very well on a 3D printer, so I'm actually going to make it more of a curve. That way the printer has something to kind of grab onto. So we're going to kind of do our own thing a little bit with this part here, just for a little simplicity of printing. You can use some support material or hope your printer will get those settings correctly, but I personally would rather just get it right. Make it simple, like so. I don't like that. There we go. Look at that, nice curves. Now let's add this little groove in here. We're going to do that by popping over here to loop cut, going to where that curve is at. We actually already have a loop there, so we're actually just going to select it instead. Move up a little bit. So let's add another loop below it, then add one in the middle. We're going to scale it in a little bit. If I want to sharpen it, we'll add a little crease, like so. Select the top one, move it down, just like that. This is a nice little loop in there without adding a whole lot of extra complexity to the model. So the actual model is pretty simple, but using these modifiers, we're able to then add a lot of complexity and smoothness without making the object more cumbersome to edit. It's looking pretty good. I think I still want this to hook in a little more, so let's tweak this a little bit. I'm going to sharpen this edge. There, I kind of like that. I like having that little bit of a sharp edge right there. I'm just going to leave it like that. There we go. Now for the very top piece. There's a few ways to do it, but we're going to do it the very easy way, and a way in which I can also show you how to do something. We're going to go to Add a Mesh. We're going to add a UV sphere. Again, it kind of disappeared, popped into here. We'll make it about 16 by 16, because that's going to actually match the rest of our object. Hit S to scale, G to grab. We're going to line it up right there. Just like that. So the top one you notice is still kind of low poly, so let's add some more polygons to it by hitting Subdivision Surface. Nice and simple. Now we want to combine these two objects. select the top one, and we're going to label that pawn sphere. Bottom one we're going to call pawn body. Now select the bottom, hit add modifier, Boolean. This allows us to add or subtract another object from an object. So while we have that selected, we're going to select the object pawn sphere. And select intersect, or sorry, union. That adds the two objects together. We're going to go back to that pawn sphere. We're going to hide it from view. So now we have just this little simple pawn all finished. There we go. That's it. Press Z, you can go into your X-ray view and kind of view it. It's important whenever you're adding two objects together to kind of zoom in a little bit and make sure you don't see any like stray polygons, but this is useful because if you ever need to go back and edit that sphere, you can edit it. And it actually edits the sphere itself and the modified object at the same time. We have our pawn done. We're going to export this for 3D printing. Let's go to File, Export STL. Then you just label it pawn. Make sure you select Selection Only, then hit Export STL. And with that, the pawn is finished. Now we can move on to the rest of the pieces.